What's up, everyone? Welcome back to this week's edition of the show, and welcome to the NFL playoffs. That's right. We are at Wild Card Weekend coming up this weekend. Teams have fought, clawed, and scratched their way to play in the playoffs this season, and now just 12 teams remain. We're going to break down the games for you, as well as cover some fantasy talk, recapping the 2017 season, and looking forward to the 2018 season a little bit. But guys, I thought this would be fun to kind of kick things off tonight. As we all know, the Buffalo Bills have returned to the playoffs, ending the longest drought in professional sports now. 1999 was the last time that they were in the playoffs. Also, the last time the Jaguars won a division was 99 when it was the Central Division. Just a fun fact there. So flashing back to 1999, where were you at this point in 1999 and what was going on in your life?
Well, I definitely had frosted tips. I know that.
Ooh.
For sure.
Oh,
Yep.
good.
I was all about the frosted tips
Yep.
gel, spiked it up.
Sugar Ray.
Oh, yeah. I would have been, a sophomore in high school? Junior. I would have been a junior. So, all the things that come with being 16, 17 years old and having frosted tips and listening to Blink-182. That's what I was doing.
My mom wouldn't let me have frosted tips, and I have probably the strictest mom in all of America at that point. So I wasn't allowed to frost my tips. I would have permed it and frosted my tips like if I could have back in 1999, because I was like this weird like preppy jockey kid back then. So I definitely probably would have frosted my tips and had a perm.
I had frosted tips and I got my ear pierced, which was a bad decision.
Wow.
And you might have
learning things about one another 14 years into a friendship.
You might have had the strictest mom in the world, but I have the craziest pap in the world. And I showed up at his house and he tried to rip it out. Not take it out, rip it out.
Oof. Man, 99, I was a freshman in high school. And I said I'd get back to this later today when I emailed you guys the agenda earlier. I was riding to school with my friend who was a senior at the time, listening to some Limp Bizkit at the time. So,
Love that.
Backwards red hat and everything.
Now, is it sad that I still listen to Limp Bizkit on the regular now today?
No, because it's kind of like a nostalgia thing at this point, isn't it? So
I don't know. I just think it's great music. I got to tell you, shooting straight.
break stuff.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
Like
South, did you do it all for the nookie?
That is the rumor. So all right. Well, I know that we flashed back to 99 and revealed some pretty embarrassing things about ourselves. I can't believe you had your ear pierced. Like, if I had to peg one person in this group who had their ear pierced, you would be the last person I would have picked.
No way.
And
Miles,
I know I didn't pierce mine.
Miles absolutely would have been last.
Yeah, but like, you were like in a band, right?
That's true. So I would have.
What was with the air quotes?
I have like albums, man. That's a band.
No,
So who would have been the first person that you would have picked to get their ears pierced?
well, you.
Given that I have both of them pierced and in right now.
Right.
Is that any implication?
Yeah, no, I only use the air quotes in a band just because like that's kind of like an in
Because
a
you were
band
trying
thing
you were
to
trying to crush Miles' spirit. I know what they're about.
do, basically.
Miles, I got your back.
Thanks.
All right. With the fantasy season finished, it's time to look ahead just a little bit to 2018. Obviously, it's pretty early. For some people, we're glad to look ahead to 2018 and get 2017 in the rearview mirror. So the first question that I'm going to ask you guys here, which forgotten star, now forgotten is kind of like a loose term. It could be somebody who underperformed or got hurt or, for a variety of reasons is off the radar right now. Should we expect to be in line for a monster 2018 season in fantasy?
Miles says it all the time, and I can't believe that he brings it up as much as he can. Or maybe he just wants everybody to remember that David Johnson still plays football. I feel like all the talk is about how great Todd Gurley is going to be next year, rightfully so. How great Le'Veon Bell is and should be next year as long as Big Ben comes back, and rightfully so. And, Zeke should be back, and Melvin had a great year, and all these guys. I feel like we're really forgetting about David Johnson. And like Deal said last week, he had like the best fantasy season we ever thought we'd see last season. And now he's hurt, and now we're talking about everybody but him. Let's not forget that, and let's like remember to make sure we rank him pretty high next year.
Yeah, I think that'll happen. I mean, there's no reason not to go him. So, of course, I didn't because I figured his name would be brought up. But I'm going to dig a little bit deeper, and this might shock listeners. I'm going to go with somebody I've been very critical of on this podcast, on pretty much anything I've ever done. I'm going with the Raiders' Amari Cooper. I'm not sure he was really ever truly healthy this year. He was battling an ankle constantly, suffered from the all-around struggles of the Raiders in general. He ended only 48 catches, 680 yards. But what I do like is despite some of those injuries, 181 of it was in the last 2 weeks, and he scored a touchdown in 4 of his last 5 games. And all, like the one game he wasn't even targeted. He didn't really play. So he ended the season really strong. I like him with John Gruden, we're going to assume, coming in to put in that offense that was nasty in the past. Anytime he had a player close to Amari Cooper's relevance.
Yeah.
So, he's going to be a guy that as much as I bang on him constantly, he's going to be a guy I own a ton next year because I think he's absolutely a mid-tier wide receiver 1 next season.
My obvious answer was Luck. I mean, I think that here's my write it down starting real early. He's gonna, no question, be the number 1 scoring quarterback next season. And I think a lot of that has to do with Saquon if they get him, but even if they don't. But my guy that I want to talk about, because that was obvious, is Mike Evans. Mike Evans is unbelievable. And he dropped down in like the 30s and sometimes over 40 in FanDuel this year as far as the most expensive wide receiver. And Mike Evans is unreal. So I look for Jameis to bounce back. I look for them to kind of figure out the running game, figure out how to use the weapons they have, and still their defense not to be great. So they're going to throw the ball a lot. So Mike Evans is going to be back to the top 5 again next season.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go along the same wavelength as you guys here with a wide receiver with Demaryius Thomas. He kind of fell off the radar a real good bit here, as well as everybody in Denver because of the quarterback play. This is a guy who I think a lot of people are going to forget about, and he's going to be somewhere down near like that 20 to 25 range as far as wide receivers go. I really do believe that what John Elway says is true. They're going to go out of their way to address the quarterback position this offseason.
They're going to get Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, and if not him, they're going to be in play for a strong veteran leader. You're not going to have Osweiler and all this unknown anymore. You're going to go and get somebody who's ready to come in and play for a team that could compete right away. So, that could shoot him back up a little bit, but he's kind of the forgotten man as far as like that wide receiver 2 conversation right now. He's really been on the back end of that this year. He's really a guy who still could give you wide receiver 1 production very easily. So I know that he's getting to the point where like you really have to hit on him at this point because he's not old, but he's getting older for wide receiver at this point. So, but he was always one of those guys that it didn't matter who the quarterback was, but suddenly this year it mattered who the quarterback was because they were so historically bad on every level. So I think he's in line for a monster year next year.
Isn't it funny how often those quote-unquote quarterback-proof receivers fall apart when they have Brock Osweiler?
Yeah.
I mean, DeAndre Hopkins was viewed as a monster, it doesn't matter, and then he has a down year, and then he's back with Tom Savage half the year. I mean, Osweiler is poison.
Yeah, with that in mind, because I think the conversation is kind of rolling in that direction, I'm going to jump down to my third point here. Is it wise to ignore bad team situations completely? The players or go for players just depending on their talent. Is it more of a bust than a boom? We saw a lot of guys this year, like DeAndre Hopkins late in the season with Josh Gordon, who the talent far exceeded basically everyone else around them. But it seems like at draft time, a lot of people are weary to jump in with both feet on some of these guys because the team situation around him is so bad. So are you at a point, maybe personally, where you're willing to ignore that a little bit more?
I think the most important thing we can do here, and like we always tell everybody, and this is a good chance to plug our beliefs here, is make your own draft board and stick to it. Because like it's okay to jump in on those guys if you're jumping in at the point where you think they should be. If you're reaching for them because you're afraid of what other people are doing or saying, then that's a mistake. Okay. But I mean, if you would have pre-ranked DeAndre Hopkins where you thought he was going to be this year, and then nobody took him, nobody jumped in on him too high, and you drafted him right where you thought he should be, then you were rewarded for that. You know what I mean? So like, just stick to your own rankings. Don't go out of control and reach for guys, because that's what gets you in trouble. But if you I'm okay with drafting guys in bad situations if you're drafting them where you had them ranked. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the key there is putting them in the right place appropriately and then taking them at that spot and not earlier.
I think it's actually an opportunity thing for me. When I look at these bad situations, like David Johnson, when he blew up, and then coming into this year, that was not a good line. Like a lot of time, you look at offensive line rankings when you rank your running backs, you have to. But David Johnson's immune to that because the volume is ridiculous. When we talk about the guys that we just mentioned at wide receiver, I'm going, if the quarterback situations remain terrible, which they definitely won't in Houston, and I don't think they will in Denver, I would be a lot more willing to still draft DeAndre Hopkins based on talent because he is a target monster. I'm going to be a little more wary of a situation like Demaryius Thomas, again, if the quarterback situation is terrible, because it's a bad quarterback and he's splitting targets with Emmanuel Sanders. So that's the kind of thing where you really have to dock. So if the situation's not great and the team is not good, as long as you're still getting a major volume player, just understand that, Mike Evans in 2016 and DeAndre last year, the targets are still going to be there for the numbers to happen. It's not going to be overly efficient for an NFL team, but I don't care about that as a fantasy owner. I want 9 catches. I don't care if it's 9 targets or 23 targets. I want 9 catches.
Yeah, for me, I did some research on it, and I think it depends. That's what it comes down to. But 5 wide receivers, 5 guys in the top 10 made the playoffs and 5 guys missed. And for wide receivers, for running backs, 8 guys in the top 10 made the playoffs and 2 didn't. And that might be an anomaly, but I think it usually leans that way, in that you usually have a good wide receiver and quarterback that leads you to the playoffs in the NFL. Now, in fantasy, it's a running back, but there are lots of teams that are winning and making the playoffs without a good running back. It just happens that 8 of them made it this year. So I think I agree with Miles in that it's usage, but if a bad guy is getting 40 carries, I'd rather have a good guy getting 20 carries on a good team. So it depends on the guy, I guess. There's a lot that goes into it. We could probably do a whole show just on that.
Right.
But yeah, it seems like as for wide receivers, it's a hit or miss thing. For running backs, take guys in good situations.
Yeah, because they're going to be melting games away late, and they're going to score points regardless. I mean, obviously winning teams score points.
Right.
But more importantly, the fourth quarter is going to go to your running back on a good team. Like there's a reason the Saints were able to fit 2 running backs in the top 10.
Right.
They were winning a lot. So Kamara got them there, and then Ingram sealed it.
Right. And Carlos Hyde made it. He, we don't know what's even going to happen with him. Melvin was in the top 10, and that doesn't matter. You're going to take Melvin no matter what. So.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. It is a case by case thing, but like every year there seems to be these guys who we all kind of fall in love with, and we think like we read the scouting reports, we look at what the team has done, as far as like the coordinators they brought in, the focus they're going to put in. Perfect example this year is Isaiah Crowell.
Yeah,
everybody would have taken Isaiah Crowell over Dion Lewis, but it goes back to that old adage, like, do you want the guy who's going to get all that volume in Cleveland, presumably, or do you want to take the guy who's going to be in a 4-man committee and roll the dice on it? So it really is like there's a lot of luck involved in it. But I think, ultimately you have to consider are they on a team that's going to be winning, number one? And then you have to look at their usage. I think it's irresponsible to just kind of say, I'm no longer going to even consider it because DeAndre Hopkins had a great year with 8 different quarterbacks. Well, like that's a special elite talent that they made a decision this year that it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback, we're going to throw the ball to him almost every time. So, you have to take everything into account.
Worth mentioning too on mine. Sorry, Rock. Worth mentioning too on mine. Of the wide receivers, I said 5 of the top 10 made the playoffs and 5 didn't. Well, the 5 that didn't were DeAndre Hopkins, Jarvis Landry, Larry Fitzgerald, and Devontae Adams. None of them had a quarterback, and Fitz also didn't have a running back. And I guess Adams didn't really have a running back either. Jarvis, they gave away his running back. So they basically didn't have a team around them. So realistically, that could be 9 of the top 10 made the playoffs.
Yeah. And I was going to say, there's really no. I hate your example there, south of Crowell, because really there's no luck involved there. It's just Browns involved there. Right. Like that everybody on the planet expected that line to be like 1,000 times better, and them to be able to do things, and they can't. I think when we're looking at fantasy, we should just put the Browns in like a third separate category of enter at your own risk because it's the Browns.
The category should just be called Browns.
The purgatory group. All right, 7 running backs finished in the top 20 overall for scoring this year. Just 4 wide receivers finished in that group. Are we now well past the 0 running back era? And do you expect that number of running backs that finish in the top 20 is going to rise moving forward?
We better be. I mean,
I'm
like I would never tell people like, hey, ignore Antonio Brown. You could absolutely make a case to me that Antonio Brown should be your first round pick next year, and I'm in, and that's fine. I won't do it, but I'm definitely not laughing at the guy that does it. Right. Hopkins maybe too, that back end of the first round, fine. But if you just do a little research here on kind of the point differentials, like South, you fired one earlier today at us, and then I did my own little research project. The differential from RB1 to RB2 is ridiculous compared to receiver 1 to receiver 2, and what I did, even receiver number 3, where you're talking about 8th overall versus 22nd overall at receiver. It's obviously different, but on a points per game basis compared to the same thing at running back, it is absolutely ridiculous to me not to load up on running back because you're panicking. You're panicking all year.
I think the reason why it's dead and the reason why it was a thing in the first place is for the last couple of years, we've been getting more and more top end fantasy running backs, special type backs, do it all type backs. But for a little while there, I felt like it was like Adrian Peterson and Shady McCoy and then chances, and because of that, because of the lack of depth of top end quality guys, we started going away from this. Well, it doesn't matter who your other 2 backs are. We'll do backs by committee, and that can be effective. And I think for that couple of year span, it was effective for some people. The problem is that we don't live in that world anymore. More and more special backs are coming into the league, and now there's not 2 and then everybody else. Now there's like 8 or 9, and then a couple of guys that are right on the cusp of that, and then everybody else. So now you can't afford to go 0 RB and take a chance because, like Miles just said, the discrepancy between a running back 1 and a running back 2, and then even a bottom end RB2, potential RB3 is far too great. Far, far too great. So yeah, I think 0 running back is dead. Unless you drafted a 10-team league and the first 9 guys went running back, then I would allow you to go wide receiver. But other than that, you better have your mindset of drafting running back first, second, and like Deal, maybe third, fourth, and fifth also.
If just to put the numbers behind it, I told you guys I wasn't going to share this with you, and of course I am. If you look, and I purposely did this on PPR so that guys like Tariq Cohen and Theo Riddick and Gio Bernard are like a thing. Running back 3 versus receiver 3 this year, the receivers outscored the backs by 7 points. So you're better off down there in the trash receiver. And I did this based on 10s. Running back 2 versus receiver 2, the running backs outscored them by 2 on an average. Not much, very close. If you look at the top 10 receivers and the top 10 running backs, the running backs outscored the receiver by an average of 46 points this year.
That's insane.
Wow.
An average. So, obviously Gurley makes a huge difference there. He was 96 points ahead of the number one receiver. But, I mean, you're even talking about all the way down through the top 10. It's insanely more important to grab that top-tier running back. And then receiver 21, Nelson Aguilar, outscored running back 21, DeMarco Murray. Like, who drafted Nelson Aguilar over DeMarco Murray?
Right.
But who drafted 21 receivers before 21 running backs? Nobody.
But if you draft a couple backs near the top, you can afford to miss on DeMarco Murray, and you probably did hit on Nelson Aguilar later on, or a player like that.
Right.
So, I mean, you had a fallback crutch, to account for injuries, to account for an underperformance, whatever it was. And the thing about this is that I'm looking at the backs that are coming into the league next year.
Ugh,
This number's going up.
it's disgusting.
Seven
This running back
top 20?
is disgusting.
I think it's a lock that at least 11 of the top 20 next year will be running backs.
Nah, I don't want to say 11, just because you got timeshares and stuff.
I disagree. I disagree with 11 for sure.
11's a lot.
Nope. I'm telling you right now, there are
Yeah,
going to be
that list.
11 backs.
Because you want to know why? Because you can add in Saquon and you can add in DJ back in, but one of those guys, injury is going to happen to somebody. Somebody's going to fall off that we thought wouldn't fall off.
That's fine. And I understand where you're coming
11's
from
too much.
with your skepticism too, but like we're going to have a very high number of really young, unproven quarterbacks playing next year. So some of that falls off. Your wide receiver situation. I mean,
so
look,
far past the line. The line
Larry Fitzgerald was a top 20 overall this year. Like, do we expect that to hold up again? I know we say that every year.
Yeah, but we expect
He was number 5.
we expect OBJ to get in though, and we expect Luck and Rodgers. Like, there's a lot of guys that are coming back here. You're not thinking of. I'll take that bet though. If you want to.
Anytime someone gives you 10,000 to 1 odds, you got to take it.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to put on that?
We'll revisit it when we get into our crazy predictions.
No, I'm good for it right now. If you
31 to 1 odds deal.
if you give me 31 to 1 odds, I'll take it right now.
I'm only giving you 30 to 1.
I'll take it still. What are we betting?
In the lake.
I'm in.
All right. Anyway, look, 2017 was by far the year of the injury. At one point, the top fantasy quarterback, the top fantasy running back, and the top fantasy wide receiver were all eventually lost for the season this year. Oddly enough, Gronk played the entire year, still going strong. So with that said, do any of these injury concerns, these trends, roll over to 2018 when you're drafting, or do you have to just completely scrap it and just call it an anomaly?
I'm going to scrap it every year to an extent.
I'm going to take
it. It doesn't matter who I take. Those players will be the injured players for next year. I'm on quite an impressive streak right now. Like, I owned my top 3 players this year, quarterback, running back, wide receiver in our main league: Wentz, Cook, Odell. How does that happen? How does that happen? 2 years ago, it was Shady and Jamal Charles, or 3 years ago, whatever it was.
Oh, you asked for it, Jamal.
Yeah. No, because that was before Jamal started getting injured every single season.
Was it 8 years ago?
No, it wasn't 8 years ago. I'm punching the face. No, so whatever guys I take are getting injured. Other than that, I'm not going and thinking
Such
about
a drama
injury.
queen.
But it's 100% true. It's like every year with me. I just finally started drafting better, so it means less come crunch time.
I'm going to ignore it when it comes to the guys from this year, because the guys that went down this year don't have that history like Jamal Charles did. That kind of situation. I'm not scared of Dalvin Cook going down again. I mean, I'm going to be huge on Dalvin Cook again. David Johnson was a wrist. Like, I'm not worried about that at all. So those kind of guys, not really. You do have to pay attention to trends. If guys are constantly nicked up, I guess. But Keenan Allen and I's relationship should show you I generally don't care too much about injuries.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be the same as always. I'm going to be cautious of guys that have a history. But similar to Miles, the guys that got hurt this year, that guys are low on now, Dalvin Cooks, those type guys, I'm going to suck all those guys up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of write it off as a 2017 thing. As Deal said, if it's a guy who's just perpetually injured, then that's a different story.
Right.
But I mean, we've never seen guys getting injured at the clip that we did this year. So I feel like a lot of people, and the reason why I put this in here was so I can kind of soapbox this moment. And I'm kind of speaking to myself here too, but a lot of people are really salty on 2017 and fantasy football. Just got to get over it. It was just a really, really weird year in every way. And this was just like the biggest way that it was weird. So don't let it affect you moving forward, I guess is my mission statement for you. So last item here, fantasy related. What was the biggest shocker, good or bad, from the 2017 fantasy season?
I think just the overall worthlessness of your draft. I mean, every year you have Jordan Howard coming up and being big at the end of the year, or CJ Anderson or whatever. But like this year, Carson Wentz, nobody saw that coming. Case Keenum, Jared Goff, like these are top tier fantasy quarterbacks. And then you had Adam Thielen, top tier fantasy wide receiver, Alvin Kamara, even Mark Ingram, he's a nice, pretty solid running back too. Well, he ends up top 5. David Johnson goes down. Todd Gurley, nobody saw him being running back 1. Nobody did. A lot of people were high on him. Right. A lot of people were high on him and thought, hey, he could maybe be my top back. But gun to your head, no one's saying RB1 by 40 points over Le'Veon Bell. So I just think the overall, like I said, every year there's a pick or two. Guys get hurt, whatever. But when you look at top 5 receivers on literally everyone's list, Antonio Brown delivered. Julio Jones, overrated how bad he was. I mean, he still ends up being okay for the year. Odell gets hurt. Mike Evans, disappointing. AJ Green, disappointing. Jordy Nelson, disappointing. So, just all the work you put in all summer meant less than it ever has in my 19 years doing this. It meant less than it ever has.
Yeah.
That's actually almost exactly what I said, how crazy the rankings ended up. That it wasn't what the world expected. It wasn't what any experts expected. It wasn't what any person expected, that it just got all mixed up. So, but don't take that to mean you can just show up and do whatever you feel like, because this is an anomaly. There was an anomaly last year. There's an anomaly every year. This one is an anomaly too. Still do your research, still stick with your standings and what you expect to happen. Rank, just like Rocco just said, still take the guys that you expect to do well personally, and just scrap this year and forget about it.
I think the quarterbacks to me in general are the ones that made the biggest deal. Eventually, it kind of figured itself out. Of the top 10 fantasy backs this season, I think 8 of them were pre-ranked in the top 12. So what you would consider a QB1. But the fact that at one point, Wentz, Alex Smith, Case Keenum, and Josh McCown were all in the top 10 quarterbacks, and they stayed there until injuries started to take.
Listen, Wentz is still number 5, and he hasn't played in weeks.
I know. Well, I understand. Well, he was number 1, and he was ahead by a lot.
But I'm just saying, to your point,
it was kind of crazy that at one point, we had 5 guys that we had personally pre-ranked 18th or lower in the top 10. I know you're going to have some running backs here or there, higher or lower, or making an emergence as a young player. But generally speaking, your running backs are what they are. You don't usually miss from 22 to 1 on something like that. And the way we did with, let's say, Alex Smith, who finished 3rd this year. Did any of us have Alex Smith pre-ranked higher than 25? I don't think so. And you'd be lying.
I know I didn't.
I know you didn't. You might have had it
Miles
on the Chiefs.
Miles didn't rank him.
We ranked 40 quarterbacks, and Miles didn't rank him.
Nope.
No, but so the quarterback position in general for fantasy is what has me in awe this year, because it's just I can't remember a time where it was that drastic.
South ranked him 24. That was the highest.
Highest was 24.
Yeah,
and he finished 3.
You ranked him 25.
Yeah, mine is very specific to a player. Number 4 overall wide receiver this year, the ageless Larry Fitzgerald.
Without a quarterback.
And every year we have the conversation. Is this the last year? You know, is the production going to drop off? And we have this argument every offseason, basically. And a lot of times it has to do with the team around him. Well, he never had a worse team around him than this year. I mean,
every year I tell you 3 that you're wrong.
The infrastructure
I was high on him this year.
Collapsed around him. No David Johnson. He loses his quarterback to a broken arm at some point. He's got another one who's apparently playing on a shredded ACL and just playing through it for the last couple of weeks. Meanwhile, he's just churning out the second most catches in the league on just a really atrocious team that somehow, I don't know, they just found ways when you know the only guy can beat you is Larry Fitzgerald, yet they still find ways to get beat by him. It's just mind-boggling to me.
It does go back to what I said earlier, though, in your question about ignoring bad situations or drafting bad situations. He got all the targets. Who else are you throwing the ball to? So, I mean, like, even bad offenses and bad quarterbacks, you're going to gain 300 yards. You're going to gain 280 yards in a game. So Fitz is going to get half of it because no one else can do it.
I think part of the hard to believe there is, like, we were all pretty high on that supporting cast too.
Well, because David Johnson was there.
Yeah. So, I mean, with the full picture, it's a really different thing. So I guess, you know, you're right when that does collapse around him, but and all those guys got hurt too at some point. So, you know, it's just crazy to me that, you know, at this point we're still talking Larry Fitzgerald as number 4 wide receiver this year. So crazy for sure. All right, guys, it is a new year, and you know what that means for a lot of people. They're making resolutions. They're setting goals for 2018. Our friends at Gorb can help you and remind you every day that in life, you've really only got 2 choices. You can either get hungry or you can be hungry. I want to encourage you to check them out at gorb.com, GHORBH.com. You could find something for literally everyone in the house. Men, women, kids, all kinds of accessories, all kinds of great gear, all kinds of apparel, different colors, different designs, different fits. It all looks great. It all feels great. It all fits great as well. I know we wear it. We don't just pump it because you know, we get hooked up because they're sponsoring the show. We actually enjoy the stuff, and we like that daily reminder that in life you've either got to get hungry or be hungry. And what better time than right now with a new year to be reminded? Check them out at gorb.com, GHORBH.com today. All right, guys, let's get into some bigger storylines around the NFL that aren't necessarily related to fantasy, although maybe, you know, indirectly they may be. We've just passed Black Monday in the NFL. 6 official positions are currently open right now. So I'm going to throw this out there. Of all of the open head coaching spots right now, which is the most appealing job to you?
For me, it actually transitions with what we were just talking about. I like the Cardinals job, and it's funny because I did a quick Google of, you know, just to make sure I didn't miss one of the open jobs, and the first thing that came up was ranking them in order of how much they're appealing, and this was last. And that's ridiculous to me because, listen, first off, they have stability. Steve Keim is a great general manager. The owner is supportive. And most importantly, this wasn't a firing situation. There's no negative connotations around this job in the locker room. Bruce Arians retired, which kudos to our boy South called that months ago. I don't know who you know in the organization, but good for you.
I got connections.
But these other jobs, like when a guy gets fired, and listen, it obviously sometimes look at the Rams this year, it turns around immediately. But there's that negative, boy, we're losers. We can't even have a guy keep his job. These guys went 8-8 without hands down their best player. So it's a solid roster. It's filled with leaders like Larry Fitzgerald, like Patrick Peterson, where you've got veteran presence in the locker room already. It's not just a bunch of young pups. Most of these guys made it to the NFC Championship just 2 seasons ago. So it's a good job. And on top of that, the only downside is there's no quarterback, which, yes, is a pretty decent downside. then again, it's the downside to most coach firings in NFL history.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers' coach doesn't get fired. So, but on top, you have the number 15 pick. And we're going to get into this when we start talking about the draft here in a month or two. I like the quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson a lot more than the guys that are going to go 1, 2, 3. And I think Arizona's in prime spot to scoop one of those guys up. So when you pick up a guy with that competitive spirit and athleticism to go with David Johnson coming back, Larry Fitzgerald's not going anywhere. You got a defense that's put together and ready to go. I like the Arizona job a ton.
I'm going to go with the job that, from a player standpoint, I think has the least amount of holes. And it's the team that we actually all expected to be the best of all the teams that are on this list right now. And that's the Raiders. I don't think Derek Carr is an elite quarterback. I think he can be. I think he can be. I don't think he's there yet. I think a lot of people assume that he is because once you get that contract, the connotation kind of comes along with it. But I think they have the least holes. I think they have a very good offensive line. I think they have 2 very good receivers and a running back. The defense needs help, but it's not like they're void of players. Like Khalil Mack is still one of the best defenders in the NFL. Bruce Irvin still knows how to get after the quarterback. They have some young secondary guys there that I think can make a difference. So if you can kind of get a defensive-minded coach to come in or an offensive-minded coach to come in who hires the right defensive guys and then draft a couple more defensive studs, I think that team is in the best shape of any of the other 6 teams that are in this position. There are too many holes for each of the other teams.
For me, it's a homer answer, but I think it's the Colts, and I don't think it's even close. And I know it's my team, but even without Andy, they have a GM that I believe in now and I think is really good. He seems to be calling the shots. Even Irsay saying, like, I'm leaving it up to him. And I believe it this time. They have a young running back that looks good. I still think they should draft Saquon. But even if they don't and they take more picks, they already have a lot of picks coming. And they have $80 million to spend in cap room. And it's probably actually going to be more than that. So they can basically sign anybody they want. And they still have room to sign, Andy and anybody else that TY and any guys that need a contract. They have young guys on defense. Their offensive line, they're going to figure it out maybe. But they have great receivers. They have great weapons. They're probably going to get an elite running back. Their defense is getting a lot better. It was better this year than we expected without, their best corner and best safety. So I think that when you go to a situation where you have money to spend and you still have a good team around, and it wasn't one of those firings that was because they had a bad quarterback. It was a firing because they have a bad third-string quarterback. So I think it's a good situation to be walking into.
I think if I could feel a little bit more confident about Luck, it would be a home run for me. They're kind of in the middle of the pack for me just because, his quote scares me a lot. Like, I don't think I'm going to need any more surgeries. Like, that's the kind of thing you should know definitively. So for me, and I love that that none of us are agreeing on anything because it turns out the best for us when we don't. I think it's the Detroit Lions. I'm not really entirely sure, other than like some really boneheaded mistakes just coaching, why Caldwell's gone. Like, they've had a pretty good record. They've been super competitive, other than just boneheaded coaching decisions. Like against the Bengals, very clearly they should have challenged whether Golden Tate made a catch or not. Could have swung that game for them completely. He just doesn't even bother to challenge it. Like, the playoffs aren't on the line. Well, we'll just see if we can get the ball back, basically. I'm not like the biggest Matthew Stafford guy, but he's been more than sufficient as the quarterback of the Lions. Their wide receiver weapons are pretty good. We tend to like overlook them, but they're a pretty good unit. I like Eric Ebron quite a bit. Like, he's really starting to come into his own. Their offensive line is sneaky good. Offensively, they're really just a running back away from competing. And I don't know if it's like an organizational thing where they just have been ignoring the running back or just missing, but just make some changes there in what you're doing as far as scouting your running backs and hit on a running back, and you're a very dangerous team. Their defense is not like a lights out unit, but they're also a pretty productive unit too. So they keep you in the game, and that's pretty much what you can ask for when you've got a guy like Stafford who, could come up big for you. So I'm going with the Lions.
Here's a question. Can you believe Matthew Stafford is only 29 years old? Did he come into the league when he was 14? Like, dude's been around forever.
Yeah, he has been around forever, but like strangely enough too, like he had that rough patch in the beginning where he was injured and didn't get played as much. So
which is like even crazier.
Yeah, it feels like he's still kind of fresh somehow. So
he should really just be hitting his prime right now, which is crazy.
Which is another appealing thing.
Yeah,
no,
I agree.
No offense to Deal, but actually I love the Lions situation because I think they have the best quarterback situation. Not if everything was Not if everything was 100%, then no. But
okay.
We know that everything does not seem to be 100% at this point. So they have the best quarterback situation. I think that organizationally, it surprises me that their GM still has a job. I can't believe that they've ignored getting him help in the form of a running game over the past 5 years, 6 years.
Really ever?
Well, they went out and got Reggie Bush for that 1 year period, and he definitely helped alleviate some of the pressure, but it didn't do the job, and they've just been ignoring it ever since.
They still just brought him in as an athlete, though.
Listen, we can go 10-6 without a running back. Yeah, but you could probably win the division and make a deep run into the playoffs if you would just give him some help.
Right.
But yeah. So I'm not out on the Lions by any stretch. But yeah, I think they're in the best quarterback position going forward.
So this conversation is going to automatically sway to my next question, which is, what is the least appealing job? And I kind of saw, that eye roll from Miles. I feel like he's gonna go.
No, I don't know. To me, Detroit screams mediocrity no matter what. I mean, I've never hidden my feelings on Minnesota, and then Aaron Rodgers coming back. I just feel like Detroit is never going to win the NFC North. So the other teams have a shot, I guess. But while I have the mic, I'll just my least appealing is actually the Giants. First off, number 2 pick seems appealing, except I think they're going to feel forced to take a quarterback. And like I said 10 minutes ago, I'm not crazy about those guys up top. And Sam Darnold might be going back to school. Josh Rosen, I'm not sure I love his attitude, his personality. Josh Allen's a project. I'm just not crazy about those guys. It's kind of a cancerous locker room because of all the personalities. The defense can't even get along with itself. You usually get finger pointing across sides of the ball, but the defensive backfield hates each other, all of them. So, you get that. For me, Odell with a rookie quarterback is a recipe for disaster. He's not going to be cool with off-target passes, although he'll usually catch them with just a couple fingers. But yeah, on top of that, I think it's the same thing that holds the Jets back a lot. You've got a fan base and a media market that's going to expect a quick turnaround. They're not going to be patient. And I don't say that critically. Philadelphia's the same way. Any of these major markets in the East Coast want winners. They're not going to be like, that's cool, we'll be okay in 3 years. They're not all right with it. But most importantly, with Carson Wentz in Philly and Ezekiel Elliott down in Dallas, I don't think the Giants have what it takes to be better than number 3 in that division. And for a long time. Dallas and Philly aren't going away.
Yeah. And I'm going to agree with you while you're on the topic. I'm going the Giants as well here, just because everything that you said, plus the fact that they seem to be recommitting to Eli until he's ready to ride off into the sunset. And I think that's a big part of the problem right now. I think he's just dropped off so much. And I don't know whether it's the situation there, the offense as a whole, what the whole picture is. I'm not exactly sure. But it feels like he needs to kind of finish elsewhere, and the Giants need to really restart that rebuild. And I don't think they're going to be fully committed to doing it just because of the backlash they're going to receive if they do it. I mean, you have 2 pieces on offense right now that are the only things that I would keep, and everything else I would just completely scrap. And that's a big problem that they have right now, and I'm not sure how you bounce back from that quickly.
The only reason – I think the Giants did the smart thing. I would pick the Giants too, except for the fact that I'm not sure that the Mara family is going to let it happen the way it has. They're a really good they're really good owners and consistently have been throughout, the franchise's history. I don't think they're going to let it fall apart and become a dumpster fire the way the Jets do sometimes, or the way some of these other teams do. I think they're going to kind of hire the right coach and the right GM to kind of put it all together and just actually put a product back out on the field. And if that means Eli Manning, fine. But I think what they're going to do, I don't think they're going to be forced to take a quarterback. I actually think that they're going to address the running back situation and try and give Eli some weapons late in his career. Listen, if they felt Eli was the problem, they would have just let Ben McAdoo keep his job and just continue to bench him. You know what I mean? Like, they're trying to be loyal to Eli because they think he deserves it, but at the same time, they know that they need to put more around him to do that. So I'm going to remove the Giants from this list, and I'm going to go with the roster that I think is in the worst predicament of all 6 of these teams, and that's the Chicago Bears. I mean, they have a lot of young guys, and that's great. I think, unfortunately, I don't know, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me at this point. We don't know whether or not Mitchell Trubisky is really the answer for that franchise long term. You know what I mean? Like, he had bright spots in his rookie year and some really negative spots for a young team without a lot of weapons, but we still don't know if he's the truth going forward for them. So it's going to be at least another year of trying to find that out. I don't expect him to be able to take like a Carson Wentz leap in the second year because the rest of the team around him is not that great. So I think not to mention the fact that a lot of people don't like to coach in the NFC North where you're playing for no better than, like Miles said, third. Realistically, you're probably playing for fourth. Yeah. So that's just, what it is. And then on top of that, it's a cold weather city. It's not an appealing city. It is a major market in Chicago where people are going to expect some big things from you, and you don't really have the ability to go out and get it right away. So the Bears' job to me looks the worst from the outside.
Yeah, well, I actually agree with you. We're 2-2 on this one. I was torn between the Giants and the Bears. I landed on the Bears. I don't have a lot to add, but yeah, they are. You said that you wouldn't take the Lions' job because they're the third worst team. Well, the Bears are the fourth worst team by a lot in that division, and it's not going to improve quickly. They have no receivers. Their defense is either bad or old or both, and they still don't have players in skill positions. So, I think Jordan Howard's really good, and then that's the end of the list. So, like, you're not going to go to Chicago for Jordan Howard. So, yeah, I think I agree with the Bears.
We were talking about Dontrell Inman as a fantasy starter in the middle of the season because he got
horrible
traded.
Season.
Yeah, like, this has just been the Bears have got to be your answer to this. I know you guys hate the Giants, and I won't argue with you, but it's got to be the Bears.
Yeah, I agree. It's not close.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the game previews for this weekend. We're going to go through these games in order. We'll discuss who we think are going to win the games and why. And we'll kind of lay it all out there for you. So let's start with the early game on Saturday this week. The Titans at the Chiefs. I've got to know who wins and why.
I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I think this is a battle of the team that was inconsistent for the whole year versus a team that was the most drastically inconsistent in 2 parts. I know that kind of makes a little to no sense, but I think the Titans were consistently inconsistent, whereas the Chiefs had the highest of highs and unfortunately the lowest of lows. I think they've righted that ship for the most part. Don't think that they're able to contend for a Super Bowl, but who knows? But I think they're still better than the Titans this week.
I had the Chiefs too because Alex Smith's the greatest quarterback of all time. So
stop it.
No, I have them because I feel like they're a better team. I don't think they're a better team on paper, but for some reason they're a better team on the field. So I don't see any way the Titans make it past any team in the playoffs.
No. Yeah, this is Chiefs. They can just beat in so many ways, and they're kind of back to rolling. It's funny how, week 6 we were all anointing them, and then they fell apart. So now we're viewing them as this mediocre team. They're back to playing they were early in the season.
Do you think there's any team more based on momentum than them?
No, it doesn't seem that way, at least right now. I mean, but Kareem Hunt is rolling again, which opens up Hill, opens up Kelsey, makes Alex Smith look good. And the defense, not great, but opportunistic for sure. So they face a team like Tennessee who struggled a little bit with turnovers. Mariota's not been what we thought he was going to be. It's cool to see him get some playoff experience because I think Tennessee's not going anywhere. But I don't – of the 4 games this weekend, I think this is the biggest home victory.
Yeah, I'll make it 4 for 4. I think it's the Chiefs. I agree with what you guys have said, basically. And also, I feel like the Chiefs are getting hot again at the right time. I don't know if hot is necessarily the right word, but they're simmering at the right time right now. So, you guys hit it on the head. They're streaky. So if they can get streaky and put together a couple wins, they could be dangerous. They already went into New England and won. It's a different monster in the playoffs. So, we'll see how that goes, this time around. But I do think that they win this game. Although I do think it's going to be a little tighter than most people expect. I think it's like a touchdown difference. So, because you can't just take for granted that, the Titans could run the ball and keep basically the Chiefs defense on the field if they want to. So I do think they'll be able to do that. So, all right, Saturday night. This one's getting hyped up quite a bit. Supposedly going to be the first 90,000 plus person sellout at the Coliseum since 1978.
Wow.
In the NFC Championship game.
It's awesome.
So I'll believe it when I see it, unless they're going to pay actors to go in and do it like last time. Falcons at the Rams. Who's going to win and why?
I have the Rams in this one. This is a shame of a matchup because I think I would take the Falcons over either of the other 2 NFC teams playing this weekend. But I can't take them against the Rams right now. They're unreal of late. Todd Gurley, obviously, just unbelievable. And now he's got a week of rest from his body getting beat up every week. Although I guess he doesn't get beat up as much as you might think because like 4 of his runs end up in the end zone every week. But he's so good right now. And a lot is to be said about not only having the best player on the field, but having a coach who's willing to use that player. I feel like, not just us, but anybody who talks about football all year, you're bringing up how little use Julio Jones is getting. And I know he did well yardage-wise, but you're going to have to score points. You're not going in and scoring 13 and beating the Rams. It's just not happening. So I just feel like for Atlanta to win this game, the playoff atmosphere is going to have to be too much for Jared Goff. I think that's the only way is if Goff starts throwing this away. The issue for me is I think Sean McVay is smart enough to realize if that starts happening, and we're going to get a healthy dose of number 30.
Yeah, I actually think that it's going to work to their favor, the atmosphere, of the Coliseum this weekend. The Rams are the kind of team that, they come out and they punch you in the mouth. And teams' goals typically when you're on the road, especially in a big game, is let's sustain, the early blows, and then we'll just get right back into it with what we do. You can't do that against the Rams. If you go down a quick 10 or 14 points against the Rams, you already have that in the back of your mind that, all right, this is not going to be our night. We cannot stop them. And I just feel like that's what's going to happen here. I think their defense probably rides a lot of the momentum and the buzz in the building, makes a big stop or 2 early. I think the Rams get up big right away, and it's just too much for the Falcons to overcome because the Rams really, they don't take their foot off the pedal. So I don't anticipate they're going to do it here either.
I had the Rams too. I think their defense is good enough to stop the inconsistency of the Falcons, and the Falcons don't have a chance of stopping them. So it could be a high-scoring game. But I don't see any way the Falcons outscore them.
Yeah, it's the Rams. They're just the better team at this point, and there's no reason to overlook that. I think sometimes we get too much into it, and the Rams are better than the Falcons right now. Done.
All right, let's go to Sunday. Sunday game 1, the Buffalo Bills at the Jacksonville Jaguars, flashing back to 1999, the Doug Marrone Bowl. Who's going to win and why?
Yeah, there are just so many things that we've talked about that make you shake your head. And just 2017, man. Yep. What a year. Bills at Jags is a playoff game. That's happening.
What a time
That's
to be
a sentence that I just said. Bills at Jags playoffs. I'm taking the Bills, man.
Ooh.
Go Belo. I don't have a great reason other than I'm not going to bet on Blake Bortles to win in the playoffs. I'm just not.
Against the Bills?
Honestly, no, I said I don't have a great reason. I actually think I do have a pretty decent reason. The Jags are unreal with their pass defense. Their run defense, not great. And I think Buffalo would be totally fine throwing fewer than 20 passes in this game and just running the ball like crazy with Shady McCoy, the plethora of backs, Tyrod Taylor tucking it away. And I absolutely think the Bills' defense is good enough to get the job done. Not enough has been said about Tre'Davious White this season. He's been awesome. He's been overshadowed because Marcus Lattimore is even more awesome. But Trey White, most years, is your defensive rookie of the year going away. He's been excellent. So I just think they're good enough. I don't think Blake Bortles is good enough. That being said, whoever wins this game is getting destroyed next week, but I'm taking Buffalo this week.
It doesn't matter to you that Shady's not healthy? Like, he's still game time decision. He's
Shady
gonna
hasn't
play,
been healthy since he was a sophomore in high school, dude.
but he's more unhealthy now. He was at the hospital, man. Like, it's the Jags because the Bills suck. Like, the Bills are just a bad team, and I know their defense has been strangely good at times, and that's pretty much all it takes to stop Blake Bortles. But this team is pretty solid. Like, they've played really well this year. So yeah, I think that they're a far better team than the Bills.
I watched the Jets beat the Jaguars this year with a healthy dose of running the ball and throwing very few passes.
Didn't you watch them beat the Bills too?
Yeah, and I watched them beat the Bills.
So
with that being said, the Bills on Reddit's final power rankings this year were ranked 15th as a team that made the playoffs in the 12 spot. So that'll tell you what I think about this game. Now, listen, I think the Jaguars are a better team than the Bills. That's just what it boils down to. I don't trust Blake Bortles to go out and win games, but I trust the team as a whole to win when the team is better, and that's the Jaguars.
I absolutely trust Blake Bortles to go out and lose the game, though. I just do.
I'm going with the Jaguars, but I'm not super confident in it. I got to tell you, like, I would be all over the Bills if I felt like Shady was like 85%.
Yeah,
but
he's not.
I mean, it just feels, and I know he's a gamer, so he's gonna go. But like, you need Shady at like full Shady mode. Like, he's got to be able to cut, and I'm just not confident that like he's definitely going to be able to at this point. So I think, a 75% Shady is good enough to keep them in this game. But eventually the Bills are going to have to pass the ball to try and win this game. I just feel like you're just going to load up the box and just dare them to beat you through the air. And I'm not sure that they can do it. So I'm going to go with the Jaguars, but I do think it's a close game.
Side note, does the city of Buffalo burn to the ground if the Bills win this game? Does somebody die jumping through a table that's on fire if the Bills win this game?
If I am the wife of a husband in Buffalo, I'm hiding because they like to throw women through flaming tables. Buffalo.
Win, lose, or draw.
Win, lose, or draw. Just get a little liquored up and it's on. All right, guys, last game of the weekend here. Panthers at the Saints. On paper, could be one of the best games of the weekend here. Who do you got and why?
South, I'm stealing your stat from earlier on today, so I hope you aren't going to use it. I'm taking the Saints because Breeze, Matt Ryan, and Cam Newton are combined 1-7 on the road in the playoffs. So I don't like any of these guys' chances on the road, so I'm taking the home team, and we got Saints over Panthers.
I got Saints too, and here's why. Because the Saints can't win the Super Bowl without winning this game.
Wow. I think you're correct, and I think they're not going to win the Super Bowl, and I think they're not going to win this game. I'm taking Carolina. I'm making it 2 for 2 on the road on Sunday with the Bills and the Panthers. I like Luke Kuechly to have one job, and that's to contain Alvin Kamara, and that sounds ridiculous. I think he's the only guy in the league who can. And keep in mind, I said contain. Kamara is not going to get 14 total yards. He's going to contain him. But my bigger point here is we're all kind of riding off of the mid-season 8-2 Saints. They're only 3-3 since week 11. They've allowed 20 plus 4 times in that span. Now, yes, you could come back at me with one of those 3 wins was home against the Panthers.
Yeah.
I hear you. But that was bad Cam. And we talk about the Chiefs being streaky, this streaky. There's nothing in sports that's streakier than Cam Newton. So it's going to hinge on him, obviously. I'm going to bank on good Cam showing up, and I just don't think the Saints have what it takes to contain him when they're not playing the same type of defense they were in October and early November. I really like Cam to kind of show out this week and go ahead and beat the Saints.
I mean, he threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for 51 yards. So, I mean, it wasn't like he had his worst game of the season against them.
No,
Yeah.
he didn't, but they didn't score 20 points, so he didn't play that well.
They scored 21.
Oh, they scored 21. Sorry.
Look, I'm going with the Panthers as well here. And here's the biggest reason. I think the Panthers are a team that is built in the middle to slow down Mark Ingram. I agree with Miles that they could limit Kamara to reduce some of these explosive plays that really the Saints have been riding on for most of the year. He's still going to get his, but I just don't feel like he's going to be going for like 40 and 50 and 60 yards a clip. So I think that'll be the biggest difference. Cam, I just feel like you don't really know what Cam you're going to get. And this is more of a gut feeling than anything. Like, I feel like you're going to get Swiss Army knife, beat you in multiple facets, Cam Newton this week. And the one thing about the Saints to this point is, the first half of the season, their defense was on a roll because they were turning teams over like crazy. And they've not been doing that in the second half of the year. And it's caused them, to be a little bit more of a beatable team in the second half. Now I get it. You're still a top seed in the playoffs at this point, so you weren't that beatable. But I just feel like for whatever reason, the Panthers are going to be are going to be the team that could beat them. They're built to stop their offense. And I feel like they're going to get it done this week. I'm going with the Panthers.
And if nothing more, just real quick, like there's the cliche of it's hard to beat somebody 3 times in a year. And one of my biggest things I believe is cliches become cliches for a reason.
Yeah.
And the Saints are 2-0 against the Panthers. And it sounds stupid because obviously they were better twice, but it's hard to do that 3 times. So again, it's kind of like South said, it's a gut thing for me. It's not all built on logic, obviously, because the Saints handled business twice already. But a gut thing for me is Cam's going to show up and they're going to beat him.
I think that was a cliche that was built to motivate losers.
Wow, that's just something ugly people say.
All right. I think that's a good place to leave it for this wild card
I think that's an awful place to leave it.
No, we're going to leave it. Let's just let that marinate for a week.
Soak in. Let that soak.
All right. Well, listen, I'm keeping track of the picks. We'll update you how we're doing, who's leading what throughout here. You can feel free to hit us up on social media as well. Let us know who you think is going to win these games, why you think they're going to win it. We want to hear from you. We want to have some back and forth. You can hit us up, facebook.com/footballgoons, or on the Twitter. We are at footballgoons. Get us in either of those 2 spots. You could also comment, like, subscribe on our videos right here on YouTube. Links to all of our social media are on footballgoons.com as well. Always good new information, articles dropping on the website as well. So you want to make sure you check in there. The bottom line is that we want to hear from you one way or another. Let us know what you think about this weekend's game, and we will get back to you and get a good old-fashioned debate going, most likely, because that's what we do best. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll catch you next time.